go get a cup. Good morning. This is Friday, May 9th. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how the months are just flying by. This is Kathy, it's So Original, and this is our top of the line club. But this month we are doing Create Your Own Stitch Book, which is really good regardless of what Bernina machine you have, or honestly, any machine you have. So today I'm joined by Sandy, Angie, Sherry, and Diane. So, and then anybody who watches this recording. So let me share my screen.
Is that in your way, Sherry?
Okay.
I can slide this way.
Can you see all right too, Sandy?
Yeah.
Okay. So today is all about creating a stitch book for your machine. Now, the other day I was looking for these stitch book examples to download them, and I would swear I saw one more that for the life of me in the last 2 days I have not been able to find. And it was from Bernina. And so I have asked them to send that to me. So I may end up sending you one more as an option. But I'm kind of thinking y'all will have an idea very shortly of how you want to proceed. So what is a stitch book? A stitch book is a visual reference of the stitches in your machine. So it's actually a sewn out version of either every stitch your machine does, which is the goal, or many stitches that your machine does. It allows you to see how the stitches look on the fabric, and it can truly inspire your creativity by introducing you to stitches that you might not have used before. Um, it also is a great way, which is what this top of the line class is about, to help you become more familiar with your machine's features, because you want to do this in a right way. Like earlier today, Sherry was asking me, well, if I'm gonna add the numbers right on what I stitch out, is that combi mode? Is that, and it's like, well, yeah, that's one way to do it. So, and a lot of us don't use some of these features often enough to be really comfortable. So that's what we're going to do. Now, why? It's a great reference tool. Stitches look so different on fabric than they do on the screen. They look way better. And if you know, you will see that pretty quickly. Again, you're going to get more comfortable with your machine, the pattern and functions, sewing without the foot control maybe, and how locking stitches work so threads don't come loose. You're going to find new stitches that you will fall in love with, and you're going to bond with your baby. So I think that's the most important part of this. Okay, so let me explain what we're going to do here today. Today, I'm going to first of all show you the different options and get a feel for what you might want to do from the options. We're going to then take those options and work through the specifics. We're just going to walk through them of how you do them. I can only put one up on the screen. I have the feeling we're going to be going in multiple directions. So I can always bring the store computer back here and have one up on the store computer as well to act as a reference. I'm not going to give you a handout, but I am going to email you a handout I've created that has all the links to all the resources for the different stitch books I'm going to show you. And I'm going to email you that is so that they're clickable links so that when you want it, you've got it. So just printing it out what meant you had to type whatever weird stuff was in there. And I don't know about you, but that only works for me some of the time. And it just depends on what time of day it is, I think. Okay, so let's look at options. The simplest stitch book, and to me, the one that is the least pretty, is the very simple stitch book that they created here. You can see up at the top, they use some ribbon, they put some buttonholes in the edge of the fabric, and then they just attach them all together, kind of a hanging little thing. Okay, I'm a little too anal for that. I don't really, it's just kind of simple. Um, they didn't finish the edges. Um, but it's functional. I also am not sure that they made the best choice in stabilizers because that's pretty darn wavy. So, but if that's what you're most comfortable with, I'm not really putting it down. I don't intend to do that by any means. The second option, which was actually pretty cool, was done by a person doing the on her 770. She made, and the instructions on this are truly minimal, but we can add to it. She made bigger pages. She put grommet holes in them, and then she bound her edges with this soft cording to finish the edges. And I believe she did individual pages and then glued them together. I have to look when we get to it. But it's pretty attractive on the actual page. If anybody's interested in doing this version, she also stitched out her cover. So, that there was that one. Okay, the one that I have two different sets of instructions for is the one that was actually done for the 790 Pro. There is one version of that that is actually two different blogs, two parts on We All Sew. That would be the one that's shown over here on the left. And then the one shown over on the right is from Sarah, can never remember her last name, from sewingmastery.com. And she actually has a fairly short video that I think is worth looking at. Then the one I'm intending to make for the store is actually one that was shown to us by Connie Fanders, who used to work for Bernina. She's the embroidery expert. You met her at your Raleigh event. And basically, that is putting individual samples, making them business card size and slipping them into business card holders. Now, I am actually, and this is what I hope to have finished today, but it got messed up. I am actually making my cover for the book out of the Amanda Murphy placemats. But I did not put the right kind of stabilizer. I had quilted the one block, but I went to add lettering and my lettering actually got stuck and wouldn't stitch out. I've honestly never had that happen before. And I didn't have any more fabric. So I'm going to have to redo that little part. So it's in that kind of this blue block. It's this block here that I put the lettering over, but on this size. Well, it's the one,
Where's yours the darker of the two?
no, it's the lighter of the
That's
two.
what it's.
It goes right here. Anyway, so I will be fixing that. So I got it disassembled, but that was as far as I got. Anyway, this is a pretty comprehensive way of doing this. This is it is one strong binder. This is my binder for this. So it has an extra piece on it. And the reason for that is that you and I will have to reattach the Velcro when we're all done. But because this will stand up like this, so when you're looking at your pages, you can flip through them. So I thought this would be a great sample to make for the store. And I don't believe they talk about it in the We All Sew blog, but first of all, I got business card holder sheet protectors, but I also got postcard sheet protectors. And my reason for that is if I'm going to sample out some jumbo stitches or some stitch recipes, I want to put them in here and have more room. So I got a bunch of pages for that. So you will see this also on my I gave you in the email, I gave you a copy of my Amazon order, and it looks like I had to reorder something. That's because I got the book and no protectors in the box, and Amazon had to send them to me again. So the only part I didn't order are the little glue-on tabs that, based on how you want to organize your stitch book, you'll use maybe glue-on tabs. My last option, excuse me. My last option is actually a modern stitch book. So what they did was, there is a blog where they went out there and they took specific stitches and turned them into things like rotary cutter holders, ruler holders, kind of cute. I mean, even if you're doing the stitch book, you may want to take some of your favorite patterns, because we all go to lots of classes. So this kind of walks you through how to do something like that. That's a pretty interesting approach. Okay. And that's good. That has a typo on it. I have I think that was supposed to be links. So, so I will fix that, cute. I never noticed that. I went through it twice. So yeah, yeah. So I will be sending you links that you can click on. Oh boy. What can I say? It's just so. Now, what I would like to know from here is to get some feedback from you on what direction you think you might want to head. So, see, and if you don't know yet, that's fine. Our next thing will be to actually go to a couple of those links and walk through them.
I like the idea of the one that you're doing with the smaller.
The
size.
business card
Yeah.
size.
I've got all these things, but I don't have to use those.
Okay. How about you, Angie?
I like the one with the 790 Pro, but when you showed those postcard size, you could probably do it long ways like the other one and do, if you wanted to do those sheet protectors, couldn't you?
You could.
Okay.
I mean, you're not bound by anything I'm showing you today. You can do whatever you feel most comfortable with, whatever's going to work for you.
Right.
And this is not a short-term project.
Oh,
We'll take care of
You're-
this thing.
You're just going to do it as you have time. And it will definitely become one of your UFOs as you're working through it and trying to make it better. So how about you, Sherry? What are you thinking?
I like the two that were on black, the 770 stitch book. And then the other one, the Sarah.
The
sewing
Sarah
that was
on the right?
hand side.
Okay. And I think on the Sarah, I think her name is Stuttgart, but I could be wrong. I believe she might take those and put them on the pages just like the one at the left. But I didn't watch the video again
Okay.
yesterday, and I looked at far too many of these to be able to tell you. I've slept since then. So, Diane, how about you?
The one that you're doing, but I also want to show you that when I bought mine, I think, what was it, 380? This is
Uh-huh.
what the store had done, like this.
Wow.
Open Stitches, and so they did it on photo.
In a little photo
Yeah.
album. Cool. I'd like to take a picture of that so I can
But they didn't put any of the numbers of the stitches, but they did bring them, and they shortened some of them and lengthened some of them, so you had an idea of what it did.
the same stitch multiple times. That's pretty cool. Okay. All right. So now let me stop sharing this screen and go to, oh, wait. Stop share. Come on. I didn't close all my browsers today. Let's go to Word. I have so many presentations up and running. I'm in the middle of like 10. All right, now let's go. So now those of you who are watching the recording can't see this. So I don't need to go over the quick and simple. Nobody's doing that. I'm not going to go through that. These are the other two. These are some other pages from the 790 Pro Stitch Book. Let's go first to the Sewing Mastery video. Whoops. Okay, now hold on. She's got to wait. And I need to come back here. I'm getting fairly decent at this. Come on. Share screen. Where is it? I don't see it. Oh, here it is. Okay, hopefully everybody can see this now. Let's listen to Sarah.
How to kill all mosquitoes in the area in just minutes. This simple but brilliant trick you can do tonight to eliminate all mosquitoes around you is take.
That's vital information.
Ah! We were told that it would be easier than free motion quilting, which is a comment
That's weird. It's not the right one. Sorry. I don't know why it did that. Do you see it? Oh, I see it. That's not it. No, I didn't even realize that video was there. Huh. I'll have to add that to the link. It's this one.
Let's talk about the importance of stitching out your decorative stitches. Sometimes people call this stitching out a stitch book. And I'm going to give you a couple ideas that will give you a you can decide to what level you take this to. So first off, what are you doing? You're taking just picking a decorative stitch. Maybe you have a menu or a whole row that you're working with, and then starting with the foot next to the edge of the fabric and sewing down that entire length. Pick the next stitch and sew it with the presser foot touching the previous stitch. That's how I do it. So prepping the fabric, and we're talking about some fabric that might be 5 by 10 inches. That's a great option if you choose to put it in a notebook. So sometimes on our supply list, we'll actually talk about just having some sheet protectors and then some cardstock that you can actually just kind of slip in. And then as you stitch a couple areas or groups of stitches, you can slip it in. You know what I've often done too is as I've had something that might just be a little extra piece that I love, I don't want to throw it away, I have a little place to put it. So sometimes in here, I'll have some other little smaller pieces running around that I can always go, oh yeah, I remember when I did that, and I can see what those settings are. Some people will go to the extent of maybe putting the numbers up on the cardstock. You could write them in. I have seen stitch books that have been stitched with which numbers you're doing. Speaking of numbers, if you have stitched out all your decorative stitches, believe me, you're gonna know where most of these stitches are. So one thing you can pick though is for some people, they touched and said that they see stitches easier on black thread of fabric. And I've had some people say that they see their stitches easier on white fabric. When you get into threads, your choice, whether you want to have some fun with some variegated thread or even using the solid colors. Oh my gosh, this was when I was doing some triple needle. So again, a place that I could slide that in and keep a little reference of that. Let me show you what I'm working on right now. This is some of the stitches out of the new FOF icon. And I've been taking the pieces, stitching with a single layer of tearaway stabilizer behind the fabric. And let me tell you a little trick about stitching this out, or I should say cutting your fabric. When you cut your fabric for the distance of approximately 4 to 5 inches across, that's usually enough for you to get an idea of how big the stitch repeat is. Some stitches repeat very quickly. Others, they're like an entire bow or hearts, and you got to know how big they are. But this is usually enough to give you an idea of how big the repeat is. Now, when you cut your fabric, when you hold your fabric up, you're going to notice that this part here on my fabric, the short distance, is the stable direction or the lengthwise grain of your fabric. If I hadn't cut off the selvage edge, it would be right here. This side, the widthwise part of your fabric, is a little stretchier. So if you were a decorative stitch and you were stitching on stretchier fabric, you might kind of wrinkle that as you go. So my suggestion is when you cut fabric for, say, preparing to sew your stitch book, cut it so the lengthwise grain is along the short distance. Put a piece of fabric, stabilizer behind it, and just make yourself a little pile of these. And also, you're going to need it for some sampling of your stitches before you stitch on your block. So besides my machine, I usually have 1 or 2 of these. So I can just stitch. I can make sure my thread is to my liking. The stitch is the one that I remember I'm picking. I can test tension as well. And so usually I just have these short little tests of a stitch prior to actually applying it to the finished block. So you're going to need to have some of these anyway set aside. And then what I'm doing, let me finish up what I was talking about with this collection here, is I was actually taking the pieces and
saving money feels right. Just like things are packed tight inside. Get auto insurance that fits you.
going back to front, gluing 2 together, and then using a rotary cutter with a pinking blade. And that's how I've gone in and cut and trimmed these. So for right now, they're just loose. And honestly, my students love to just pick through them or flip them over, look at all the stitches. I don't care that they get out of order. The idea is that they look at them and see how fun they are. Now, if you and I mean,
That would make
okay, I
me
gotta give my
crazy
husband credit for
not
this.
having
As
the
you see,
numbers.
started
That's
stitching out the stitches
Oh,
just like this,
Yeah.
with each one being a
That's a lot
different
of work
color
for
with neon
Yeah.
threads, and I fell in love with it. Well, I couldn't let it go. He only stitched like the first 20 stitches and then just kind of left it for me. So the story goes that I couldn't leave it alone, and so I had to. And so I think you really see each stitch individually when those threads are each different. I'm not saying that that's something you want to do, but I have had a lot of students do it. And the trick was I didn't just sew one row with, for example, the pink thread and then switch thread to the next color. I actually had multiple pages going at one exact time. So I might put pink on the machine and then I stitch this stitch one from this menu and this stitch one from the next menu. And I had them labeled. And if
Well,
I
that makes
stayed semi-focused,
Yeah.
I was able to keep track of jumping, just touching the screen and moving from menu to menu as I changed colors. So I was sewing anywhere from 4 to 7, maybe even up to 10 different pages at a time with one thread. And then when I got all the way through a series, then I switched threads and then kept going. I really love the effect. Now, one more thing about the stitch books that you could do. For me, just getting them stitched out on these top-of-the-line sewing machines is a feat. So for those of you who finished, I salute you. But if you wanted to take this one step further, is you sew out a couple repeats of a stitch, and then you might change the width and length. And by changing the width and length at different intervals, so you might narrow it and then sew a little bit, and then you might make it longer and sew a little bit, and a couple combinations of each, the stitch you started with is not going to look like the stitch that you finished with. And it's going to give you even more inspiration and know how that stitch is going to look when you stitch it out. Now, just a quick idea, when we get to double needles, you could take all these stitches once again and stitch them with a double needle and make a whole entire new stitch book just with how the stitch looks kind of intertwined with 2 threads. Oh my gosh, just wait till we get to double needles. As you can see, I get excited. So
She's-
another one is if you wanted to take.
She's
and
actually
buy
talking about,
some
see the stuff behind
like
her?
the
She's
card,
talking about the
the business
Cosmos
card,
class,
and then
and they
one
do double
little
and triple
repeat
needle
of
work
each
in
of
there.
The couple repeats of each of the stitch. It's a great way to kind of have a flip through stitch book that you can come back to at any time. That's a great option. I love that particular look. Speaking of decorative stitches, I just want to make one little note. Like I said, I'm a Craftsy instructor, now Blueprint, and along the lines of other instructors that I fell in love with, Carol Ann Waugh has a Blueprint class, and it is in your handouts, but we'll make sure you know the links and everything. She has a class called Stupendous Stitching. Stupendous Stitching is a fun way of using decorative stitches. You know, we're doing kind of this stitching cosmos, we're doing it on a block, but she takes it to a whole entire level. She'll do it almost as an art form and frame them or cut out fabric that she has created. And you can kind of see by the front of this book what I'm talking about. So if you kind of just fall in love with threads and decorative stitches, and guess what her first lesson that she talks about? Yes, stitching out a stitch book. So as you can see, this is a book that you can get as well. And we'll give you in our reference or resource pages, we will put this in there. And again, she goes into and talks about lots of different threads. She does do a lot of couching, which is coming up in our lesson too. But she plays around with a lot of fabrics for fun backgrounds. And you know what? I bet here is her stitch book. There it is. Where she's taken, and even with some of these, she has taken where the stitches do change for different widths, 3 different settings as they're sewn. She kind of stitched them and then kind of put them together in a little kind of grommets along the edge. So great way to
Kind of like the 770 person.
be able to reference them at a later time. So the sooner you get going on your stitch book, the happier and easier it will be to select stitches as we move between all the lessons.
Okay, I didn't realize there was a video for this one. Let's watch this one too. Yeah.
Hi, it's Robin here from quiltingintheloft.com. I'm here today to talk to you about making a stitch book. And a stitch book is where you use your Bernina machine and explore your Bernina decorative stitches. I'm working with the Bernina 790 Pro. You may have a different Bernina machine, but this is for all machines. The Bernina 790 Pro has 700 decorative stitches and 10 sewing alphabets. So for me, I would like to explore what all of those stitches look like, what the sizing looks like. I also want to know how to use the I dialog button. And that's the little button that's right here. It says I, it's an I dialog button. I want to understand how to use that. This process will help you to use that. Also, when you use the question mark and you touch the different stitches, it will also help you to understand what those stitches are for. So when you're looking at the practical stitches, you know, if you check on the question mark, what the stitches are to be used for. It also helps you with the sizing of the actual stitches, and doing a stitch book will help you to understand how the stitches move, and that's highly important. So up next, we'll talk about the supplies that you need, and I'm going to show you the actual stitch book. It has been a really fun time for me. This is the stitch book part 1. I will have another blog post coming up with the stitch book part 2, because I've gone from menu 1 all the way to menu 600. Go all the way to menu number 2201. So I am at 600. So as you can imagine, I have lots of stitches to go. But I've been excited with every single stitch. It's really interesting to see them stitched out for real. You do have a book that shows you little written, little drawn out icons that show you all of the stitches. But what's really great is that the stitches are actually more beautiful than the drawing. And so that's really a great process.
That's in your manual.
So let's talk about the actual stitch book. So I have a stitch book here. As you can see, I have the practical stitches. I'll bring it up close so you can see.
Thank you.
And then I go all the way up the different decorative stitches. These are actually cross stitches and beautiful satin stitches and gorgeous, some really gorgeous satin stitches. And I'm just going to explain to you how I went through the process and what supplies I needed. And so first of all, the icon sheet. It helps you to understand when you're actually working with the different functions with machine, what the icons mean. These icons here, these icons here, these icons here. And also when you get into this screen, which is the I function button, the I menu, you can figure out what all of these icons are to use this icon sheet. So it's vitally important. If you don't have an icon sheet that's laminated like this comes with the 790 Pro, you will find the icons in your machine manual. And I do recommend that you take it out, print it, and laminate it and keep it in your sewing room handy. You'll also need some decorative threads. I have an assortment of decorative threads here. I have red and yellow and purple and pink and fuchsia, blue and green. You can use whatever colors you want, but I, with each menu, changed the colors so that I knew that my utility stitches were in one color, that my satin stitches were in another color, that my cross stitches were in another color. You'll also need a glue stick. You'll need some fabric. I made all of mine on black fabric. Black fabric that's been stabilized with a tearaway stabilizer. However, I've just kept the stabilizer on there. It's a medium weight stabilizer because it helps not only with the stitching, but it helps it to stay stiff when you're putting it into your sleeves. And I use these clear sleeves just from the stationery store, and I put them all in that so that I could put them in a binder. And I use cardstock, keeps it nice and firm, so it's easy to slide it into the binder. I use my machine manual to refer to all the numbers for the different decorative stitches. And I used a marker to actually mark beside the stitches what they are. What the number is for them that to refer to. I use pinking shears and pinked around the edges of my black fabric like this. You can see it's pinking shears. It's pinked rather. And I'm using a bobbin weight thread so that I wouldn't have to change my bobbin color. Oh, yeah, my bobbin color. And I think that's just about everything that I did use. Obviously, you need to have some binders as well. And in my blog post, I'll go into more depth about, on the Bernina International blog, I'll go into more depth about why I have a stitch book. But as you can see, I'm just gonna pull one of these pages out. I have, put all the stitches out. These are nature stitches. They're the 100 plus menu. And what I mean by 100 plus, it's not that there's more than 100 stitches. It's just, it's in the 100 plus numbers. Menu, and I've written the stitches with black pen. You could do this totally differently. You could do this in the credit card or the photo folders that you can find in the scrapbooking stores, but I just decided to do this because it was affordable and I could use something that's readily available, like these clear sheets from the stationery store. I used my permanent marker to mark the numbers for each stitch, so I knew what number they were. So I can go through this book now and refer to it. So when I'm doing something that I need decorative stitches for, it's so easy for me to go and have these stitches readily available and to refer to. And, you know, maybe I'm doing something for spring and I want tulips. And I know that this stitch number 103 is tulips. There's also a 101 that's tulips. There's 102 that's flowers. But it turns out that with this book, it's really neat that the sizing is so obvious when you're stitching out. So I'm going to give you some examples. The stitch number 245, I'm going to pull out that out of my book. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in our machine manual. This is number 245. It's right here. You can see that very well. The beautiful rows, okay? In the machine manual, it shows right here. And it is really tiny. You can't really see the quality of that stitch with just this little tiny drawing, which is an effective drawing. It's exactly what it looks like. But when it's stitched out in big in real stitching, it looks phenomenal. And I was really excited to see that. How beautiful that 245 looks. So this is another benefit of actually having a stitch book. You can actually see the size of your stitches. I'll show you some other examples. The cross stitching, how vividly beautiful is that? Just gorgeous. And then there's some satin stitching that I wanted to show you. And number 506. So I'll refer to the manual. Line number 506. So number 506 just looks like a little wee kind of curly Q right there. Okay, it doesn't look like much, but when you actually stitch it out, and pull it right out of the book for you. 506 is this one right here. You could actually measure a block with that measurement. It's very big, and make this a frame around a block. So it's a fantastic stitch. So it's really exciting for me to go through the process of doing this. You can see how big these are, sideways motions, satin stitches, the 500 plus menu. But it gives you an idea of the sizing, which is really, really important. You could choose to also use like a white cotton. I just used a black cotton, so I thought the colors would show up really nicely on it. And also shows up the sheen of your embroidery thread as well. This is on another menu, but it's smaller, but in this particular menu, the 500 plus, it's quite big. And sometimes you need different sizes, depending on the project that you're working. So it's a really effective way to explore the decorative stitches. I'm only at menu 600, as I said. I will be working on all of the 700 to 2201 menus coming up, and also I want to work through the buttonholes as well. Right here, when I go back out of this menu, I have done the utility stitches. I have gone to all of my decorative stitches up to 601, right to there, but I still have 2 more pages to do. So I have a lot of stitching coming up, and so I'll show you those on a later post. I also want to show you the sewing alphabets that are available. There are 10 available, the sewing alphabets, and I also want to show you the buttonhole stitches. And there are several of those as well. I also want to show you the menu that has all of the quilting stitches. This is just the ones that you personally love, and this is your history. So those really are not, they're stitches, but they're stitches that you put in there, that you're working on. So I will go through these first 5 menus, and you'll see the second part of my stitch book series on the blog, and I will link that blog post below. Thanks so much for joining me today when I talked about my stitch book for my Bernina 790 Pro. I'm hoping that you will try and make one as well. It's definitely been a great experience for me. I'm planning on doing a stitch book as well for my 350, because this has been such a great experience. I'm hoping as well that you'll look at my blog post at the Bernina International blog. I will link that blog post down below, and that you'll follow along as I finish this whole series. I'll have another part 2 with all of the rest of the stitches that I'm going to be working on in the 12 or 2200 series menu. And I hope that you'll like and subscribe and check back to my YouTube channel to see what I'm up to with my Bernina 790 Pro. Have a great day.
Okay. So, oops, I have to turn that off. Darn. Hang on. Where is she? Oh, great. Just mute.
Hey, this is Gail with Bernina.
Oops. Oops, coming back. Okay, before I go on to the blogs, I did want to talk a little bit about the Big Book of Stitches. This is an amazing reference book and might be helpful if you don't already have it going forward with this. First of all, there are great ways to be adventurous using this book. So first of all, it's going to give you all the categories for your stitches. Okay. Now, of course, this was printed before the 990, so it's missing a few. Then what I really like is it talks about the creative stitch functions and tells you on each machine what they are, like mirror image, pattern begin, pattern repeat, pattern extend, the long stitch, other things like that. And it gives you in detail how to do those. Okay. So sometimes when you're making your stitch book, you may want to incorporate, as you start looking at things and you start getting adventurous, you may do some little pages that show you certain stitches. It also goes into, of course, stitch length and density, but then it's got tapering stitches, which we just really barely touch on in mastery, but it's how to do it and how to make little frames, and it's taking you through the step-by-step. Those bigger pages that Sarah had off to the left that looked like the boxes, my guess is those were tapering stitches. I was really hoping that she would show them, but that didn't happen. Then one of my favorite parts of this book they do some things on multi-directional stitching. So you could make an additional page where you made some notes on multi-directional, and then they totally get into stitch mixology. So, oh, I forgot to be showing this on the screen. What can I say? So it's all about how to mix your stitches to come up with certain combinations. And then, and this pages again. Then this book actually has stitch recipes, and it's going to tell you how to sew these. So you could find a couple in here that were your favorites and put them on your postcard pages and think about how you might want to utilize them. So, I mean, to me, this is kind of a, depending on how many other UFOs you have, this is a really fun adventure. So, does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. All right, now let's go back and let me call up. Let me go, let's see. I think I'm going to hold off going to that blog, and I want to go to the one that is the 770 version. Let me share my screen. Let's come back here to Zoom. Share my screen. Okay. Oops, let's get that off there. So this is the 770 where they incorporated the numbers onto the page. So can somebody tell me how that was done? Do you have any idea?
Probably go into where your alphabet is, because you've got your numbers, and you would type that in. Then somehow, because I don't know how to do the combi mode, incorporate, go to, like, let's just say if it was stitch number 656, pull it up and you add it.
Yep.
I think there's a
So what you're going to do is you're going to be totally on the sewing side. You're going to go to the sewing, pick a font in the sewing side. Every machine's going to have a different number of fonts. Your first thing you're going to enter is your numbers. Then you're going to go into combi mode, which is that little plus at the bottom of your stitches, and it will then let you go in and pick the stitch to add. And remember, when you're in combi mode, it shows the little screen off to the right that shows what you put in the combination. So on this particular blog, this was the world's shortest blog. 4 years after my instructor at Mastery class told me to do it, I stitched out all the 770 stitches. I cut pages out of black cotton fabric, used a medium weight stabilizer, and after stitching out all the stitches, I joined the pages back to back, meaning she glued them together, with my 2A foot and bound the edges with rat tail cording. You can use some other soft stuff too, and my 21 foot. Okay, that's the extent of her directions. Like I said, somebody must have been late on their blog assignment, but this was her cover. Then you can see, you know, she used the circular motion foot to stitch out some things. She really did a very pretty job with this. Now, the only thing she doesn't give us is the size of her pages, but honestly, they look pretty big to me. And she allowed room at the top and the bottom, and she even typed the words of what the folder name was at the top. That says decorative satin. So, anywho, okay. Let's go now let's go back to the 790 Pro blog. And this is the first one. So if this is the one you're working on, she goes through, here are her supplies. She's telling you to cut your fabric 6 by 10. We have medium weight fusible stabilizer, which I will bring back here. I'm going to go get all of our store threads, so you have lots of colors to choose from. And she just made a paper cover for her book. So the first thing was to cut and stabilize the fabric, to insert the correct presser foot according to what you're stitching. So in the beginning, you're primarily using your 1C foot, or maybe your 20C foot, 20C or 20D. And then once your fabric page is filled, glue it to the cardstock, and she's saying mark it and label it. And if you picked up on Sarah's tip, when she did the next row, she put the edge of her foot, her presser foot, as her guideline for moving over. Now, if you are a person who does not sew straight, you may want to mark your first line of stitching with some kind of marking pen or ruler. Ask me why I know that. So, and then she wrote her numbers on here, and then that is the video. Let's find the second one. Here is her second blog. We get so many interference. So here in the second blog, she recapped one. So I will just leave that up when we're done. And then here's the lesson she learned. Start, stop, and speed buttons helped keep the stitches consistent and improved efficiency. So she did not use her foot pedal. She used her start, stop button. The magic of the icon, which Brenda calls, I want to do something else to this stitch, allowed me to mirror image, determine the number of pattern repeats. Also, if there is a triple stitch option, you may want to consider that sometimes, because that makes a huge difference. Contrasting thread is really good. I like what Sarah said about using the same thread on multiple pages. Now, for me, when I'm trying to keep track of what I'm doing, because I'm easily distracted and pulled in 1,000 directions, I might make a black and white copy of the stitches out of my manual, and that would be a part that I would keep in my little stitch book box and check them off as I did them, especially if I was flipping from card to card, because otherwise I'm going to get lost. Some stitches need less tension or more depending on the fabric used, thread type, and the speed. If the bobbin thread comes up from the bottom and shows with the top thread, stop and lower your tension. Okay. If the top thread, you can tell that it's really looping down, then you're going to less increase the tension. And she's also saying use light hand pressure, especially with multi-directional stitches. We barely want to touch the fabric. Remember, you have great feed dogs, which are going to direct. And definitely if you get to sideways stitches or you skip to them and start there, draw a chalk line. And for your 990, if you've drawn that chalk line, turn your camera on and focus on the chalk line, because you know the sideways motion stitches feel like they're getting away from you. And then she just talks about labeling. Okay. And here's bunches of examples. Okay, one more blog. Let's look at. We did those two. Come on. Okay. So in this one, the person used muslin fabric, but I personally prefer to have a color and make my stitching other colors. It doesn't necessarily have to be black, but black is good. You know, I might do purple and blue, and it's going to be my 990. I'm going to do whatever I want. So, now when they did this one, they used cotton thread, but and they used bottom line in the bobbin. And so what she said was she did starch her fabric before she started, and then of course used tearaway. She cut, these were the directions for how she cut her fabric. So starting at the selvage edge, trim it away, cut 1 3/4 inch strips, and this is how many you're going to get, and then how to make them into the business card size. Then when she was stitching out, she used the 20C or 20D. It gives you great visibility. She aligned the right side of the rectangle with the 5-inch guideline on the stitch plate, which is a much longer line. And she began stitching, and she kept her eye on the right side of the fabric. And after she's stitched out as many as she wants, then she prepared her cardstock. So, and she wrote the stitch number in the upper right-hand corner of the cardstock. And I believe we have cardstock here too. She did go back and trim. It looks like she actually, because she was going to do her cardstock later, when she got done with each stitch, do you notice how she wrote the number in the corner on the fabric? And then she went back and cut that off. So she gave you all the measurements. And of course, you can write notes as you go too. She also took a photocopy of the pages out of the sewing the manual, and look, she did a bunch of different colors. So, okay. Questions? No? Okay, are you ready to get started? Okay.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
If we're doing the one for the business card size, couldn't you just as easily mark the sizes on the fabric?
And then cut them later. Yes, you could. To me, that's another alternative because then
An awful lot of time.
it's going to
Yeah.
save time matching up all those little pieces. Yeah, I'm not big on matching little pieces. I'd rather take the size, the overall size that she used. Let me find it back here. So, like, that's the cardstock. Ooh, sorry. Okay. Her rectangle, she's using fat quarter size. Okay. So you could draw your lines on the fat quarter and draw them going both ways. And now the only thing, I do think you're going to run into some stitches that the repeat might be bigger than the business card size. Since I haven't actually done this, I don't know that to be true, but I would think that's a possibility. And those, you know, you can have a combination of total clear protection, those clear dividers and bigger pages. You're going to see as you versus the little business cards because they're just separate notebook pages, basically. But yeah, Sandy, I think that would be a really good idea. Okay. So yeah, she used, so knowing you're going to have to work with, so she used a fat quarter and then we have larger stabilizers now because they've made the bigger roll. So it actually fits. You can cut the tearaway stabilizer that quarter size because one edge is 20. So I just let it hang over a little bit and then cut your other edge. And then this gives you in here, what you need to work with is your actual rectangles are 3 3/8 by 1 3/4. Okay. So, all right. I am available for questions for anybody who's looking at this later, but we're going to get busy here sewing. So I am going to stop sharing and I am going to stop this recording and end this Zoom class. Thank you for participating.